Okay, I'm going to do a quick demonstration of Auto-GPT. In this case, I'm going to do a search for something reasonably common, not a large project, but we want to find the top 5 EVs to buy in 2023 with a $50,000 budget and 50 miles daily range with some occasional long distance driving, and then we're going to save it to a file. There are a number of wait time points in the video, so a few I'll show in the beginning and then I'll cut them out, like what we just saw there. I'll try to cut out the dead time while I'm waiting for it to respond. Here you can see it's responding to what I said. It's now thinking about what its plan is. It's created an EV GPT. This is an autonomous agent that will now try to find information about what I am targeting, the 5 top vehicles for 2023 with the other criteria. And we'll get to see how it handles that and how it reacts to what it discovers. Okay, now it's asking to do a Google search with for electric vehicles with my criteria. So I will, as the guided operator, I will acknowledge to do that by just typing Y. If I did Y hyphen a number, it would be autonomous for those number of cycles, but in this case I'm guiding each step. So I did a Google search, pulled back the result, and based on that result, it is now thinking and processing that information, ideally in something that would be easy to consume on my part. And so now what it has done, it found a hyperlink, caredge.com, so it's now going to follow through with that. But it failed, and in this case it failed because it came back with, what's the error here? Hyperlink too much output. So we need to, or it needs to try again with less response. It can't handle the response size. So now what it's going to do is try to write a Python script that will do what it needs so that it can run that script and extract that data and then do something with it. So it tried to run the script. You can see at the bottom it failed because it doesn't exist. So this is one of the issues with Auto-GPT is it will find, it knows it needs to run a script and knows the name of the script, tries to run it, but it didn't yet create it. So now it knows it needs to create the file. So it will create the file on its own because I acknowledged it to move forward. And in this case, it created a Python or an extract info Python script. And then it was written successfully. So now it has the file. It's going to think a little bit. In this case, I'm just letting the thinking run through so I can talk. And then once it's done thinking, it will, in this case, try to run the script. So now it's just reiterating what its plan is and the pros and cons and what it's thinking. And now it's run it. The problem is, and I'm not showing it, the script is empty. There's really nothing here of value for it to do. And there is some content up above, but what it returns is empty content, the way it's working. So it's trying to, but the script isn't empty, but the actual output is the way it wrote the script. So it can't gather the information, so it's stuck in that now it knows, see it says I've executed it, extracted the relevant information. The relevant information is empty, so then he's now going to read the file called extractedinfo.txt, but it doesn't exist. So there's just a lot of odd steps in here, the way it handles it. And I don't fully understand why, but why it's actually doing this. But it's trying to read a file that doesn't exist. So what it will now do is create that file after it thinks for a bit here. So I thought it was going to try to create the file. Instead, it's just trying to update the script to create the file because it expected the script to create it. So now it updated the script and it's going to attempt to rerun it, I think after this next cycle. And then ideally there it will have information in the script about the top 5 EVs. Now the key here is if I had Googled this, I would have probably had the answer in 30 seconds. So this has been, and I've cut some of the time down, this has been 10, 15 minutes or more, just trying to cycle through this process, waiting for it to figure out how to interpret the data online. So I had a little bit of a glitch here where for whatever reason I think we missed the content of one of these, and it's just showing the link to the getting an API key. This happens when it just kind of generically has a problem, bad JSON or something. So now what it's going to do is execute the script. The script had no output for it to consume, but ideally it should have created an output file that it could read. I'll open these files when it's successful, does something, but there's nothing to look at just yet. So we'll see what it ends up doing next. So now it knows it executed the script, so it's now going to try to open the file, and the file's again not found. At this point, it kind of gets stuck, and it looks like it's going to be a loop. So it updates the script again to write to the update the script it's going to run. But at this point, I don't want to get stuck in the loop, so I basically just kind of reset the question, not to continue doing what it thinks it needs to do, and just say, what are the top 5 EVs for 2023? Write the result to a file and see what it does. So now it's going to think about my sort of redirection. After it started getting stuck in this loop, writing a Python script to extract the information. So it kind of got diverted off of a sidetrack by Googling and then going to a URL that had too much data. So rather than attempting a different link, it decided that it was best to just write a Python script to extract all that data. But then it got stuck in writing its own script that really wasn't providing a result. In this case now, by doing I guess it said, did a Google search, it pulled this data. Now it has the top 5 and it saved it to a file. So it wrote the top 5 to this file, and now it's thinking again. Now what's interesting about what it's going to do now, I was a bit surprised. I didn't actually expect this. So based on having written the top 5 EVs, even if I agree with this list or not, which what is odd is there are no Model Y in this list, so it's a little vague on where exactly it got this data now. But I'm not going to argue that specifically, just that it successfully got the 5 and put it in a list. But after it thinks here for a bit, it then ends up generating an interesting file of the details of the top 5 cars. So this is interesting. We could see it used the write to file to provide more additional information about these cars. And then it thought again, and I was curious about what its next step was, that it was going to attempt to do. So we could read through here. Sometimes the reasoning and sometimes what its plan does make sense. In this case, it's a little unclear what the next one's going to be. It ends up generating a pros and cons text file listing what's good and bad about each of the top 5 cars. I thought that was interesting. I did not expect that to do that. So some of these are disappointing. Some of the outcome is expected. Some of the outcomes are like this, where it actually produced more information than I was anticipating. The big obvious drawback is there's no Model Y, which I would have expected to be in this list, and people can disagree about this list one way or the other, but what it actually stepped through with is very interesting. And here you can see the detailed info on each of the top 5 cars, and here are the pros and cons for each of the cars. So at this point, I have what I need. So instead of continuing through looking at car and driver, say no thank you, this is sufficient. And then it begins to think again on my response. So it is nice that you can interject and redirect the course of this. And what I thought was interesting was this next response that came up. Auto-GPT was going to leverage GPT 3.5 as a negotiating agent to talk to and negotiate with dealerships to arrange test drives for electric vehicles. At this point, I didn't continue through. I'm not entirely sure what its response would be. Theoretically, it could call, text, email, use voice synthesizers and other options to interact. That's something in the future that we could see what it can do. But right now, I stopped here because I wanted to compare how this compares to using just ChatGPT. The noticeable difference between Auto-GPT and ChatGPT is that Auto-GPT actually does live Google searches and in theory can pull contemporary up-to-date information. One of the things you'll note when looking at ChatGPT, if you ask it a question about real-time data, it'll let you know that its last update was September 2021. So it doesn't have up-to-date information. Anything after that date, it doesn't know about. So in terms of up-to-date latest car prices, its list would be or prices or availability, its list wouldn't be equivalent to using Auto-GPT because that can do contemporary data. Outside of that, ChatGPT, if it did have up-to-date data, would be superior because it gives you the result instantly. Whereas Auto-GPT, depending on how you ask the question, either goes about it very roundabout and fails potentially, or seems to grab the data pretty well and then list all these pros and cons and details and everything else, even willing to negotiate with dealerships in theory. So it really depends what you're asking. If you're asking for something up to date, you want some ongoing work, refined version of Auto-GPT will work great. If you just want to know some information about something in the past or how to do a procedure or something that's well known and has been, then ChatGPT would be the superior option. Thank you. Please subscribe.